right, it is December 5th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. This is we'll begin with the executive session portion of the Sherborn Select Board meeting. I'd like to please ask the Assistant Town Administrator to read the executive session portion of the agenda, please.
Okay, item number 1, meeting with town council in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, and Suffolk Construction versus DCAM, 449 Mass, 444, parentheses 2007, to discuss Igor Lebowski, trustee et al. Versus the town of Sherborn, Land Court number 21, MISC PS 000193, parentheses HPS, and 31 Hunting Lane, LLC versus the Sherborn Board of Appeals, Housing Appeals Committee, number 2021-05, and 41 North Main Street versus the Sherborn Board of Appeals, Housing Appeals Committee, number 2021-06, and pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements, specifically the Public Records Law, General Law, Chapter 4, Section 7, 26, to discuss privileged communications from town council regarding litigation. Item number 2 is a strategy session to prepare for contract negotiations with non-bargaining unit employees pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, lieutenant position from the police department. Item number 3 is strategy session to prepare for contract negotiations with non-bargaining unit employee pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, the DPW director.
That's great. Now, as chair, I declared an executive session is warranted for the aforementioned and the four read agenda items, and I move that we move into executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And Marianne?
Aye.
All right, please stop recording. We are in executive session. Okay, welcome to the December 5th, 2024 Sherborn Select Board meeting. We have exited executive session and now in open session portion of the meeting. Just a quick note in this meeting, it is a pretty full agenda, pretty good. We're gonna, do a good process and let everyone speak, but I ask that we kind of keep things moving to the extent feasible. All right, all that being said, I'm gonna ask the Assistant Town Administrator to please read the open session agenda.
Good evening. So after I read the agenda, the board can vote to remove or approve the agenda. I have anybody has not come forward for a public comment tonight. Items can be taken out of order and topics not anticipated 48 hours in advance may be added. Our first item is the 2025 annual town meeting. For the select board consideration of opening the annual town meeting warrant for 2025 annual town meeting. Item number 2 is the consideration of appointment to the Energy and Sustainability Committee, Rochelle Masters, for a term to expire June 15th, 2027. We have a 7:30 p.m. posted tax classification hearing that Wendy Alassi will discuss with the select board. Item number 4 is the fiscal year 2024 financial audit review, and Chad Clark, CPA from Roselli Clark and Associates, will be here to discuss that with the select board. Item number 5 is the consideration of various licenses, the ABCC license, common vicular license, class 2 license, and stable licenses. Item 6 is the consideration of the reserve fund transfers for town buildings and fire department. Item 7 is the consideration of final obligation of the ARPA funds. Jeremy Rossett will be here to speak on that. Item number 8 is the introduction of the draft FY26 to FY31 capital improvement plan and FY26 capital budget request. Jeremy Rossett will speak on that one. Item number 9 is the consent agenda, which consists of the payroll warrant. Item number 10 is select board reports. Item number 11 is town administrator reports. He will be speaking on design consultant for Route 2716 and the director of assessing.
Very good. Thank you very much. Do I have any motions relative to the agenda?
Move approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff? Jeff, you muted. I assume you said aye, right?
Aye.
Paul?
No, for a technical reason.
Yep, and we'll address that when it comes up. And Marion?
Aye.
All right, 4-1. Okay, so moving on. 2025 annual town meeting. Consideration of opening the annual town meeting warrant for 2025 ATM. Is this you, Jeremy?
Yeah, just quickly, this is the time of the year that you typically would open up the warrant to allow for citizens petitions to be submitted. If you so desire to open up the warrant, you should do so with a kind of scheduled end date when you'll close the warrant. You may want to consider January 23rd at 5 o'clock as your end. You have a meeting scheduled for that evening. It would be a convenient time to then close the warrant. So would suggest that you vote to open the warrant and that you'd anticipate closing it January 23rd at 5 p.m.
Okay, that makes sense. Silly question. So someone submits something, let's say at 23rd at 5 p.m. There's not enough time to go on the agenda for that night. Can that be one of those things? Can we still talk about it that night? You know what I'm talking about? Or like
You can always
unanticipated type
open and
thing?
close the warrant and to allow things in, but
Okay.
it's good to give a window of an expectation.
Okay. All right. I agree with that. Do we have any motions or discussions relative to this?
Motion
Yeah, go ahead,
Oh.
Paul.
to open the warrant today at December 5th and to close January 23rd at 5 p.m.
Sounds good. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and Marion.
Aye.
All right. It is 7:26, so we can squeeze something else in before the hearing. Consideration appointment to the Energy and Sustainability Committee. Rachel Masters for a term to expire June 15th, 2027. Do I have any questions or any motions relative herein?
I move to appoint Rochelle Masters to the Energy and Sustainability Committee for a term to expire June 15, 2027.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and Marion?
Aye. And I
You
wonder
might
if
as well.
the telephone number that's one of the participants in this meeting is unidentified. There's a telephone number. Is that perhaps Wendy Masters?
Rochelle.
Hi.
Rochelle
Can you hear me?
Masters?
Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. This is Rochelle Masters. Yes.
I think we usually give people a chance to say a couple of words about themselves. And I think it's worth hearing from Rochelle Masters, even though we're a little behind time. Just a quick description, Rochelle. Your CV was very impressive.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes. So I've been a longtime Sherborn resident since 2008. I've served on the recycling committee in the past, and I've worked prior at the utility company, what is now Eversource, in a variety of functions, spanning across all the different organizations, including rate setting, energy efficiency, smart grid, and electricity and gas operations. I also worked at MathWorks, where I participated in their grassroots employee-led organization, Green Workers, that raised awareness and educated other employees about the impact of climate change and climate action. And during my time there, I participated in educational events, and I ran meetings and brainstormed future topics and such to help employees reduce their carbon footprint. Then at my current company, I lead the climate action initiative for the whole company, and I engage employees to build awareness of the climate crisis and actions they can take to mitigate their collective impact for themselves or as a group. And I have, in this regard, organized green volunteering events, such as an electric vehicle showcase, a climate reality project talk, and tips for climate-friendly actions to lower the personal carbon footprint of employees. I also calculated the carbon footprint for the company and partnered with a third-party carbon offset provider to purchase carbon credits to manage the company, to offset the company emissions.
I-
And I also volunteer. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Rochelle. I think I need to cut you off just because we're on a very tight schedule at this meeting, but
Sure.
I think it's wonderful to hear what you've done. I did read it, but I wanted the public to hear it because you're a great addition to the Energy Sustainability Committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for volunteering. Absolutely.
I appreciate
Okay.
it.
So moving on, it is now, actually it's perfect timing because it's now 7:30 and we cannot start a minute ahead of time. And it is time for agenda item number 3, the tax classification hearing with Wendy. Now, Wendy, should I read my set statement first or you want to say
Yes,
something?
please, to open it, yes.
Okay. The Sherborn Select Board is holding a virtual public annual tax classification hearing via Zoom today on Thursday, December 5th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. to discuss whether all 5 classifications of property, residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal, should be taxed at the same rate or at different rates. Whoop, it just went away. At different rates for fiscal year 2025. Interested Sherborn taxpayers are welcome to attend the hearing via Zoom, during which both written and oral statements will be accepted and taken into consideration. The only other thing I wanted to add, I just want to actually thank Wendy for doing this. I mean, most people probably know that Wendy's moved on to better and greener pastures. And I want to thank her, first of all, for agreeing to come back here and do this. That's huge. And it's very professional of you. And I thank you for that. And thank you for the years that you've worked here. I've enjoyed working with you. And, we've been working Framingham, and I just, I think it's great. Just thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. My pleasure. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to start this off with a very sincere thanks and gratitude to my assistant, Amy Davidson. She's been wonderful and holding down the fort, managing everything since my departure. So I really wanted to thank her. And also the Board of Assessors, Kathy Pierce, Ed O'Neill, and our newest member, Greg Sheldon, Sherborn resident. He's been a great addition to our team. Jeremy Marset, and the finance team. And I'd like to thank Dan Sitchell and notably Nora Lynch. She's my liaison from the advisory committee. So as you know, we are here to decide if we would like to adopt a residential factor of 1 or if we would like to shift the burden over to commercial, industrial, and personal property. Before you make that decision, I'll just give you a very brief overview. I know you have a long night. I apologize for not getting the packet to you sooner. Has everybody had a chance to quickly review it?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to start off by saying that the tax rate has gone down by 37 cents. Last year, the tax rate was $16.95. This year, it is $16.58. The average single family value for last year was $1,103,000. This year in 2025, the average single family value is $1,175,118. The average tax bill for last year was $18,696. The average tax bill for this year is $19,483, with an average increase of $787.61 for the average single family home.
Do you know what the percentage that is? The percentage increase for the tax bill?
I don't know the percentage, but I do know that the overall single family class has increased by 7.1%. So the overall value has increased by 7.1%. I spoke to 4 or 5 other communities over the past week, and most of the other communities in their overall single family increased anywhere from 6% to about 8%. So we're right there at 7.1%. I did a quick analysis for fiscal 26. I do believe, based on 2024 sales to date, that there will be an additional increase. Potentially, I'd be a little conservative to say about 5% for next year as well, which I will deliver that information to Dan, so he can get that in the budget model for this year. So in any case, jumping to new growth, residential it was actually surprisingly higher than I had anticipated. So the residential new growth in value is $11,863,100, which is $193,706 tax dollars. The commercial, industrial, and personal property is $2,926,000 in new growth, and that adds an additional $48,516 to the tax rolls. So it's a little higher than last year. If you'll note, there was, in 2022, it was 620,000. A lot of our growth in 24 came from, and 23 came from the blended method of valuing utilities, Eversource and NSTAR Gas and Electric. That's leveled off. That's why the personal property number is a little bit lower than it has been in years past. So I would predict new growth, to possibly be about 150,000. I think we're kind of heading back into that 130 to 175 a year for new growth until we get some developments going. So let me just take a look here. As you know, we have a 95% residential, overall residential, and 5% is commercial, industrial, and personal property. I wanted to correct, there was an error in this presentation. I wish our unused excess levy capacity was 2 million. Jeremy kindly pointed out, that it's 791,000. Jeremy, can you just confirm that? I think it was like 790. Yeah, $791,137, which is good. That we didn't raise right to the maximum levy.
Do you happen to know what the excess levy capacity is compared to last year?
I don't know where I'm getting this number. I want to say it was like 1.2 last year. Deb or Jeremy would probably be able to answer that.
Yeah, I believe that's close. That's clear. That's correct.
Okay.
Wendy, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Just a clarifying question. When you say new growth, you're talking about growth in the total tax.
Correct.
Yeah, revenue. What component of that is new construction, new houses?
So for the residential new growth, I think there was like 8 new structures built, and the others were just additions and smaller items.
Oh, so new growth actually means addition to the
Correct. Yep.
private
Yep.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not
And
okay.
right, and use change. And I did want to mention one thing that was different for this year is we had that large property, Milbourne, go exempt. That, and there was a few other conservation properties which resulted in a $181,000 loss of taxes.
Now, is that, I had a question, because I think those ones that went exempt were already under one of the chapter 61s, wasn't it? So is that kind of like does 181,000 calculate the fact that was probably already a reduced tax burden? You know what I mean?
No,
Okay.
No, Milborn was not
Really?
under chapter 61. Is
yeah.
that correct, Wendy?
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't factor in the way that I came up with those numbers was what we were actually receiving in revenue.
Okay.
So although it's wonderful, unfortunately, it's $180,000 loss of revenue. So
And sorry to
okay.
interrupt again, Wendy, just because we're
Sure.
still on the new growth. So for
Yeah.
the residential new growth,
Mhm.
was that mostly just basically a bunch of single family houses here and there?
Correct. Yeah.
Because there aren't really any like multi-unit developments that are finishing up, right? There's really nothing
No,
going on
that
right
ship
now.
has sailed, unfortunately. But Whitney Farms are so there was a couple there. There's a few more that will be 100% complete next year. 39 Wildwood wasn't 100% complete. So, that will be on the rolls. 176 Lake Street, 160 Nason Hill, or 160 Nason Hill, 3 Nason Hill Lane. So there has been, even though it hasn't been a large development, right? There's been almost $12 million of value. So I was a little nervous because the permit numbers were down. But I think it's something, maybe we could watch for 26. But it didn't seem to really impact this year. So moving on from new growth and the correction of the excess levy capacity, looking at other surrounding communities, we're most in line, if you will, with Millis in terms of the tax rate. So tax rate in Millis is $16.42. The values are lower. Medfield, this is 24's rate, and we don't have 20. They don't have their rate set for 25 yet. $14.64. Holliston, this is their fiscal 25 rate, so it's been certified. Their tax rate for this year is $15.06. So when I started, the tax rate was $20.52, and it's down to $16.58. I'd like to take credit for it, but it's the value. So wrapping up, as always, it's recommended to retain a uniform rate. Again, 5% commercial, industrial, and personal property. It's going to hurt small businesses in town, and it's not going to really help the residents at all. So if anybody has any questions.
Isn't there one industrial zone lot in town near Odessa? Maybe not.
There's two, I believe we have 2 400 class codes. Yeah, but yes, correct.
Well, as much as I'd like to put a $20 million tax burden on those 2 parcels, I suggest we actually put I encourage a flat rate like we've historically done.
Yeah, residential factor of 1 is generally, or has only ever been adopted. And also the other thing, if we were to ever decide to split the rate, is that actually impacts farms. So chapter land is also considered commercial, and so that would also negatively impact chapter 61 properties and 61A and B.
All right. Any questions or motions from the board? Actually, this is a hearing.
So
I'm going to ask questions amongst the board, and then I'm going to ask questions amongst the public, and I'll bring it back to the board. So are there any questions here amongst the board?
One more question, Wendy. I didn't see anything about the overlay in here. Was there any activity regarding the overlay that was relevant to the tax rate?
So interestingly, for the past couple of years, we had to fund the overlay significantly. There was outstanding appellate tax board cases with NSTAR Electric and Eversource. And the state actually took a stand and sided with the communities and adopted the blended value method of 50-50. So we had a large amount in our overlay account. So for the first time, I thought, why don't we ask the Bureau of Accounts if we don't fund the overlay? Because we have so much excess and surplus, and they allowed us to do it. So we did not have to fund the overlay last year or this year, because there's enough money in there. And at some point, depending on how the abatement season goes, there may be a release of the overlay in the next 12 months. And that's up to the Board of Assessors and Jeremy and advisory. So
Wendy
Marion,
and
go
maybe
ahead.
Steve can help. For the rest of us public who don't know what overlay means in this context, could you define it?
sure. So there's a certain amount of money that we set aside, that communities set aside, and that offsets any exemptions, any residential abatements, commercial abatements, any liability that the town may come up against. So for example, we received abatement applications for NSTAR Electric and, for Eversource and NSTAR. We knew in advance that these were coming, so we set aside money. So in case we lost the appeal, there would be an account where we could draw from to cover that liability.
Right. Who is we in this context? We mean advisory,
The town.
the town okay.
Yes, it's a factor of the budget. So
Right,
there's a
okay.
portion of the budget that covers any liabilities and also exemptions or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
It's like
Yeah.
like a reserve, Marion. It's like a
Correct.
reserve.
Yeah,
I just never heard it called overlay before.
yes.
All right,
Oh,
anyone
that
else
was
on the
the
board?
zone.
Anyone else on the board? Okay, I'm gonna turn it on to the general public. For the general public, please use your raise hand feature. Does anyone have any questions here for the board or for Wendy regarding this, or any just comments? All right, seeing none, I'm gonna turn it back to the board. Any further questions or motions relative to this item?
I have a motion.
Okay, Paul, go ahead.
I move that we approve a residential factor of 1 for the upcoming fiscal year.
All right,
Second.
have a second? All right, all in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
All right.
Paul,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
I am as well. Well, thank you again, Wendy, and thank you, Amy.
Thank
This has been,
you.
And again, thank you, Wendy, for all the time you've given to the town and our many conversations that you and I have had over the years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for everybody for the opportunity. I'll miss everyone.
We'll
Yeah,
miss you.
we miss you.
Yeah.
Good
Absolutely.
luck, Wendy.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
You too. Have a good holiday.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
All right, moving on. Agenda item number 4, fiscal year 2024 fiscal audit review. Chad Clark, CPA from Mazzelli Clark and Associates. Do I hand this right to Chad, or is anyone else going to intro? Guess not. Chad, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
Good.
Yes, I'm going to present the financial results for the FY24 fiscal year, which ended as of June 30th of this year. Jeremy, can you confirm, was the drafts distributed?
Yes.
Okay, so okay. I just want to know whether I'm kind of talking where you guys have a reference point, or if it would be kind of a blind view of things. We anticipate, with any luck, issuing the audit report formally tomorrow. Right at the moment, I don't expect any changes or anything to happen from what you've seen between now and then. So I'll just jump in here real quick. I'll try to go through the highlights, and then you all feel free to ask any questions if you want afterwards if I don't cover something well. For your purposes, probably one of the better areas is starts on page 4 of the financials, called Management's Discussion and Analysis. It's kind of a narrative version of what happened with the financials during the year, and doesn't really require as much, so shall we say, core accounting knowledge to make heads or tails of it. So one of the things I'll start with is the financial highlights. On the positive side, as a whole, under full accrual accounting, the net position of the town, or the retained earnings or fund balance, however you want to look at it, increased 2.3 million in FY24 to a total of 21.9 million. So you had positive operations for FY24, which is really good. I would note, when you look at that, you're going to see a negative $13.3 million unrestricted. I like to cover that because a lot of people kind of get excited, like, oh, why are we got a big negative? Of that 13.3, 18.4, so a much larger, $5 million larger amount, is represented by your pension and OPEB, which is retirement health insurance liabilities, that you will be paying out in many future years. So the full amount of the liability has been recorded, but you're going to pay your pension out as the annual assessment to the county between now and 2036, for example, is the scheduled date. So that's not that deficit doesn't necessarily represent an immediate liability to the town. It may be a liability. It is focused on liabilities into the future. So I wanted to point that out. Within the governmental funds, which is more in line with what's reported to DOR and how you all maintain your books in the town. It's a modified accrual basis, not full accrual. The governmental fund balance ended up with a total of 12.1 million. This was an increase of 3.7 million over the prior year. And breaking that down, 2.5 million of it was generated from one-time debt issuance, long-term bonds, with the other 1.1 million being from positive operational activities. And I would further focus in on the fact that of the 1.1 million increase, 0.7 million of it, so about 2/3 of it, was positive surplus within the general fund itself. So moral of the story here financially is your general fund ended up with a surplus of about $750,000 when all was said and done. Your debt obligations long-term for bonds increased 1.1 million to a total of 14.1. Obviously, as I noted before, you issued 2.5 million of new debt, so that resulted net in the 1.1. Jump over to, if you were to go to what is page 15 or 14, 13 and 15. That's the governmental funds. I just want to give a quick explanation as to what you're looking at there. So your general fund is pretty much exactly what you're used to thinking of your general fund. You were just talking about your tax rate setting and stuff. So that's where your budget appropriation money is accounted for. The only major difference about the general fund in the audit report versus here is that your stabilization money is reported within that fund. So as you can see, that fund ended with about 5.9 million of a fund balance. I can break that out for you. 5.1 of it is unassigned, which means it's available to be appropriated by the town at a future point. Of the 5.1, 1.3 million of it was stabilization, and the rest is what primarily comprised your 3.2 million of free cash at the end of FY24. Okay. The capital project funds is wholly encompassed within that. That's all of your projects that you have going on that have been classified as that. As you can see, you know, a lot of public works expenses were going on. Your library is classified within the function of culture and recreation, in case anyone's, and I know the library is always a major part of your financial activity, and working through closing that project down. So that's what's in there. And as you'll see, if you go down towards the bottom on the page 15, you'll see the 2.5 million of long-term debt issued. So when I talk about that, that's where that number shows up. The library fund is really your trust funds. So it has nothing to do directly with the construction of the library. That's the trust funds on hand to support the library in future periods. The next fund is your ARPA fund. I'm going to skip over that for a minute and just, I want to highlight a couple of things about it later. And then your non-major governmental funds is pretty much the pond of everything else that makes up your activity, with the exception of, if you go a few pages later, your OPEB trust fund is reported as a fiduciary fund.
Hang on, real quick, I'm just going to interrupt. Sean had a good point. Could someone actually share these pages? When he says page 15, does someone have that like electronically they can put up on the screen? Awesome. I think, thank you, Sean. That's a good point.
Yeah, I think I do. I'll share it out.
I think it'd be good to follow it versus just the kind of verbal.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to slow Chad down. He was going at a good clip, but
I know, but it does make sense. Like, I'm reading
No,
it.
it's
It's easy
fine.
for me because I'm looking at it next to me because, you know, printed up. It's right. The general audience does. And this,
Yeah,
this
actually,
is
leave it
recorded and
right
people are going
there.
to watch this.
Yeah. So just so you can kind of see. So yeah, those are the different the columns that I was talking about. And at the bottom is the fund balances that comprise what people would typically think of as fund balance or retained earnings for each fund. So you can see capital projects. There's still about $1,027,000 of fund balance to be spent. The library trust funds has about 3.1 million. One of the things I'll point out, just because I don't want people misunderstanding it. Jeremy, could you go up to page 13? So 2 pages farther up. So yeah, thank you. So of that 3.1 million for the library, please note that the non-spendable portion is about 2.4 million. What that means is that's the corpus of donations over the years. That money cannot be spent. It is only allowed to be maintained and to generate like investment income to be spent. And then that's where you get the restricted balance of 706. That's what's available to be spent. So I just want to make sure people don't get the idea that there's 3.1 million that can be put to the library. At best, you're looking at 700,000. Just for clarity. The other thing I'll point out is the ARPA fund. You'll see there is no fund balance. That's a grant. So until the money is basically spent, it's being viewed as unearned revenue. As of the June 30th, you had about $500,000 of ARPA money waiting to be spent. And since we're talking about it, I'll kind of jump in on this right now. So ARPA funds, the deadlines are now coming hard and fast. At the end of this month, all of that money has to be obligated. If not, it has to be returned to the federal government, and that's across the nation. I will tell you that my understanding is that you've got a very good grasp of that, because Jeremy and Deb have been contacting me over the last week, just trying to get some final understandings of what obligated means and what can qualify. So I don't have too much concerns for you all, but I do on my end need to like just make sure everyone's aware that it does have to be obligated, and that goes beyond just the selectmen, let's say, earmarking it for a use. It has to be, there has to be a contract in place or goods ordered, things like that. I won't go into the minutia of it because, as I said, I know your financial team has it covered, but I do want to make that clear. And then from this point on, you have 2 years to actually spend the cash. By December of 2026, all payments to all vendors has to be made. So where do I want to jump to? Couple of things I want to highlight. So of the unassigned fund balance that you'll see in the general fund, 5.1 million, one of the things we view as a yeah, it's right there. All right. It was right there on 13, Jeremy. Yeah. Is its ratio against the expenses of the town. So 5.1 million represents just about 15% of the annual general fund or the annual budgeted expenses of the town. So that gives you an idea of the health of the fund balance. You have effectively 15% of your next year's budget waiting for use if necessary. Obviously, a lot of people like to keep it as a reserve. You know, there's been a few years, as we all know, that in the middle of the year, the stock market will crash or something and the money comes up short pretty quickly. So the town's in a good position to absorb that if it needed to. Any questions based on what we're looking at right here?
Anything?
Okay.
And just so people know, when they're sharing, definitely use your raise hand feature because I can't see anyone except for like a couple of people. So looks like we're good.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, so I would also point out of interest is the town does maintain its a AAA bond rating still. So that's particularly good. One of the things that's obviously kind of shaking out in the economy right now is if you took some new debt recently, you actually didn't do too bad, but interest rates were going up for debt. And that was kind of slowing down development across the board, whether governmental or commercial or residential, because just loaning the money was way more expensive. I mean, it had gone up probably close to 2% from 3%. So obviously pretty significant cost differential. Obviously the Fed lowered the rates a couple of months ago. Things kind of have started to shift out. What the long-term impact will be, I'm not even going to speculate here. But there is definitely some movement. People are starting to borrow some money. I don't know where the town's plan is for any future construction. I know the library is winding down, but that's just something to kind of keep in mind as you go forward here. That things may get more favorable in that regard. So having the AAA probably helped you a bit when you just issued that 2.5 million, because you were safer, you're a less risky community to invest in by bondholders. If there's no more questions on the financials, probably I'll just jump over to the governance letter. Jeremy, if you have that. So while Jeremy's pulling that up, what was historically referred to as a management letter has effectively been replaced within the industry with a letter to governance. The profession went to focusing more on making sure that there's a direct communication between the auditor and those tasked with the, executively running the town, which would be you all. There's a lot of just standardized wording in here. What I will tell you is, we encountered no issue with the town staff obtaining the audit information, working with my team. It's a good place to audit. I think we get good cooperation back and forth. So I'm happy to report on that. I think it makes everything easier for everybody, easier on my staff. And we try very hard not to make the audit intimidating to clients. That doesn't help anyone in that regard. One of the references down a little bit below is regards to, I believe it's the next page. Yeah, right there. What are the most sensitive estimates? And it kind of comes down to your pension and your OPEB, because those are not fixed numbers. Like long-term debt, you have an amortization schedule. You have debt for 20 years, you're going to pay off, how much principal, how much interest. These amounts are actuarially determined based on estimated lifespans and estimated health costs 10 years from now. So obviously, when we're looking at the liabilities for OPEB and pension, and you read the financial statements, just keep in mind they're very good estimates by professionals, but they are to a large extent an estimate. And like I pointed out, it does encompass about $18 million of liabilities. So it does have an impact. If you want to go down to the little farther down for me, Jeremy, right here. All right, so I'm just going to cover some of other audit findings or issues. This is kind of the stuff that maybe would have been in a management letter in the past. I just want to reference here that relative to your pension, the town's liability increased by 1.1 million to over 12.7 million. But in this mix, the town's funding ratio actually improved. So a lot of that has to do with, again, actuarial calculations of liabilities mixed with fluctuations in investment income year to year and how that all gets absorbed. If you look, the Middlesex County retirement is only slightly more than 50% funded. And at this point, they're targeting 2036 to be fully funded. By law, everyone has to be funded by 2040. So what this means is just kind of pay attention. That's only their target is 12 years from now. They want to make up 45% of that liability. That's potentially a big assessment to absorb, and depending on how the stock market goes in those years, it's just something to kind of for the town to be aware of, that as time goes on, that pension assessment may need to grow in order for them to meet their funding deadlines. Conversely, with regards to OPEB, that does not have a deadline, and that is something that you control more directly. And I would point out that the town has made a good contribution every year for the last 8 years of $200,000. And that results in about 3.1 million having been accumulated, and that represents 35% of your OPEB liability already that's funded. So you're doing well over the 8 years. You've already a third of the way there. So I applaud the effort and the focus on that. Economic challenges, as you guys are all about to head into budget season. Obviously, the items below are probably, after the last couple of years, very obvious, but it looks like inflation has probably peaked, short of any major changes, but it isn't going down. So the cost to run the town in the form of wage inflation and energy costs and goods and services, as of right now, we're not seeing any reductions to those. So what you're funding right now is probably kind of your foundation, let's say, to a large extent of what you're going to fund into the future. So that's something to keep in mind. I would just point out fraud risk. Be alert, be aware. Our audit is a financial statement audit. It's not a fraud audit. If we run across fraud, we would obviously let you all know. We didn't. But a lot of that is up to the town to remain diligent on. ARPA, we talked about the obligation date of at the end of this month. And then network security, I would just point out, cities and towns continue to be a target for ransomware. I know within about the last year and a half, there was a large city in Massachusetts that largely shut down their city hall for about a week and a half, able to do any business while they figured it out. So training employees on how to avoid that, keeping up to date with virus protection and processes and firewalls is always something to never be slept on, so to speak. The next, if you want to just scroll down a little bit, the next two I just point out. Number 6, really almost everybody largely in the state, with the changes that school lunch went through since the pandemic, and now the state is fully funding school lunch meals, so they're free for everyone. What the Fed doesn't pay for, it's generated some unexpected surpluses within the school lunch revolving fund. Technically, under the DESE education nutrition program, you're not supposed to maintain a fund balance of more than 25% of your annual expenditures. It had creeped up to about 88%. So that exceeded the state allowance. In talking with Deb, I know that in the last 6 months or so, the school does have a plan for how they want to use a significant amount of that towards equipment improvements. So I would say that is in process of being handled and corrected. And on number 7, one of the things we ran across was as part of the audit, we found an invoice for $461,000 for highway costs incurred through June 29th. As of middle of last month, that was supposed to be funded through 2 state grants. That money has not come in. Those are reimbursement grants that the money needs to be requested. So we'll, from a perspective here, operationally, I kind of have to point out that that's about $500,000 of town money that right now has been floating those invoices that the town could have been reimbursed for. 6 months at 4.5% interest, that's about $10,000 of interest that the town could have earned on its own money had it not gotten them had it gotten the money in more timely. So there is certain aspects to this that I would just say I don't have the specifics as to why, but it's worth investigating the process and seeing if the timelines can be shortened up there. Not here. The only other thing I'll point out is at the request of the town, we earlier in the year did perform a departmental review of your cemetery, and those results were previously reported as part of a different engagement, but we did take a look at that and gave feedback to your financial team. I know you got a lot. I covered everything that I was hoping to cover. I don't know if people are looking for some clarification or questions, but feel free to ask.
All right, any questions from anyone, board, public, either way? Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
So this financial statement makes me smile. It's a good financial statement. It
is.
The history here, when I first became a member of the select board, things were pretty grim. All our buildings were needing repair. There was a shortage of professional employees. There were some who said the town wouldn't survive. And then when I read this, I'm smiling that we've not only survived, but we're flourishing. That we're meeting our bills. Our buildings are pretty much all up to date. We have great employees. Everything is well. Thank you for this report. It's quite hard.
Yeah. You know, Paul brings up something that I think I want to give some credit to. We started about 3 years ago with the town as the auditors, and there was a lot of people on the financial team who were exiting the door at the time or were just coming in the door at the time. And I know that, like, you know, Deb had gotten the title of town accountant, finance director, which I think was kind of semi-new of a position overall with the title. Jeremy was imminently coming in as the town administrator, and I know both Heidi and Pam are on here, but I know at that time, I think Heidi was just coming on as the treasurer. Pam was there as a collector. I know there's been some changes, but what I would point out is that combination of the treasurer collector brings you in line with almost all other communities in Massachusetts. And I'm hoping that operationally and efficiency, like Paul was saying, that the town will be able to recognize some cost savings and time savings by kind of funneling all that through. So, but I did want to kind of double down on that with what Paul said with the people. It's, you know, we get good answers when we ask questions, and it makes me more comfortable. So
It's a good team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, any other questions or comments? Now, there's no vote required from us, correct, on this here?
No.
To accept this kind of thing? Okay, just making this up. Okay. All right, very good. Well, again, thank you so much, Chad. And it has been great working with you the last 3 years, and I hope to do for many more as well. And this is good news. And
Yep.
thank you very much.
No, and we thank you, you know, for allowing us to be your auditor.
Absolutely. I hope you have good holidays.
You too.
Thank you,
Thank
Chad.
you,
Bye,
Chad.
Could I suggest when the report gets issued, we post it on the website?
Sure.
The town's website, so all our taxpayers can see that things are well in the town.
Good use of their funds. Absolutely.
Will do. There's actually a page we created, Paul, that has this information on it on the website. So when we get the final draft or the final, we'll post it up just like we did last year.
Great.
All right, I'm going to move things along here a little bit because we're not even halfway through.
Thanks,
And
Chad.
the pretty thick agenda. Absolutely. All right, agenda item number 5, consideration of various licenses. We have ABCC licenses, common victor licenses, class 2 licenses, and stable licenses. Is Jeannie speaking to this, or is this, who is this? Is there any just talk, or?
I'm here.
How you doing?
Good. All right, this is it's similar to every single year we do this. All the inspectors went out, they inspected every business, every stable. There's nothing that is keeping any of them from being reissued. You have all the information. The packet was published on the website, so I think unless you have questions, it's pretty standard.
All right, any questions, comments from the board? Anything else? Any motions relative from the board? Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
So I move that all of the licenses that were part of the packet that was posted on the town's website be renewed in accordance with its terms.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
All right.
Paul,
Aye.
Marianne, you're muted. I think that's an aye. All right, and I am as well. That's great.
I do have a renewal certification that needs to be signed by the select board. You can come in and do it individually. We have till the end of December to get it signed, so it's nothing that urgent.
Can we vote to designate one person? You pretty much need all of us.
You I should have at least 3 of your signatures.
All right, stop by.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, moving on next. Number 6. I'm moving so fast, I'm not keeping up. Consideration of reserve fund transfers for town buildings and fire department. I believe, is this Jeremy?
Yeah, I can give a summary. Sean is here as well. I did send around a memo from Chief Ward. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but he did provide some detail in a memorandum that I sent around. So there is it's a tradition that the select board have an opinion on reserve fund transfers. The final approval is the advisory committee. So at a future meeting of the advisory, they'll consider these requests and formally adopt or not, pending their discussions. But for your thoughts, there's 2 reserve fund requests, one for town buildings of 115,649. Sean can give a little bit more detail on that as far as the need and the urgency for that work. And the second was for fire engine 3. During a response to an incident, it had steering malfunction and had to be towed to a vendor to get repaired at a cost of $20,066.09.
How do you tow a fire truck? I guess a really big tow truck.
Yeah, very big. Yeah, that's a big tow truck, big boom and all that. But for reference, the entire vehicle maintenance budget in the fire department is $22,000. So this in one fell swoop kind of zeroed that out. So an unanticipated need. Sean, could you give a little bit more context for the town building?
Yeah, I could give context of both actually, if the chief's not, since the chief's not here. But so for the town buildings, for a couple of years during presentations, I was talking about the needed maintenance of the sprinkler system at Town Hall. For those that don't know, Town Hall, when it was remodeled in the late 90s into 2000, they did put a full sprinkler system in, but because we don't have town water, obviously, there's a cistern, there's an 8,000 gallon tank, and a fire pump. It resides out in front of the parking lot between Route 16, kind of near where the sign is for the building. So underground, there's a bunker, there's a pump, a jockey pump, a bunch of electrical controls. It's not the greatest environment for those systems. They don't actually build systems like that anymore. And that's why if you look out at Jeremy's office on a nice day, you see a brown building. That's for the library. They don't build them below grade. They build them above grade now. The tank is obviously below grade, but the pumps, all the electronics are above grade because it's a lot of money to be sticking underground where it can flood or get wet. But you know, the building's showing its age. It's 24 years since we remodeled it. So we knew we had to do some work. There was more work than we thought to get everything into electrical code and NFPA code compliance. So that's the lion's share of the cost. I'm actually working backwards the way I wrote the sheet. But a similar thing with the septic charges that you see on there. I don't have it in front of me, but you all do. In case anyone doesn't know, the campus has one shared septic system for the police station, the community center, and town hall. So next to the police station out on the lawn is basically a small sewer treatment plant that does some nitrogen reduction. And then each building has its own septic tank. So there's pumps because everything in the police station's below grade that pump it up. Again, everything being 24 years old, we were out of compliance with some pumps failing. And, you know, Eric could speak to this because it's his day job. When people have to go in and work on pumps that are inside of an injection system or a sewer or a septic tank, it's expensive. It's a lot of work because it's confined space. So they had to rewire some of it to get it electrically compliant. And then, you know, the plumbing had to be changed around, all new pumps. So again, it was more than we knew months ago, but we have to stay in compliance, or DEP will cite us for non-compliance on that system. And just to elevate the concern, keep in mind that septic system is only about 150 feet away from the public water supply well. So we really can't be caught messing around with it and letting ourselves get out of compliance, because it'll show up in the well results. So those are the major costs. We could have, as everyone knows, we've talked for years, back in Jeff's days on advisory, about how to fund some of these things. They don't fit inside the operating budget, and that's why it's here for reserve fund transfer. A few years ago, the rules were a little looser internally with what we would use annual town meeting appropriations for, especially the free cash side. So that's you haven't ever seen a reserve fund transfer for the town buildings this high, because that's what we would have done. We would have used the annual town meeting money. But capital budget committee, combination of that and advisory, have kind of pocketed that money to certain projects, and there's not as much leeway, much to my chagrin, with the project. So it comes up like this.
Let me jump and ask a quick question then. Are we going to see anything, because on a later agenda item is about the draft FY26 or 31? Are we going to see any items there relative to this, or do you think you might want to add something relative to this incident, to this actions, onto the either next year or future years capital plan?
Well, every year we have that discussion about how to fund the town meetings at annual town meeting for the facilities capital, because there's I don't want to say a gray area, because we had an auditor on earlier, but there's an area between the legit capital projects, like building a building, doing an addition, something that's several $100,000 that's all bondable. But between that and the operating budget, we float in this area of this maintenance. We could have capitalized this, right? We extended the life of these systems by far more than 5 years. But we're funding in the operating budget. So some would always argue, well, it should be in the operating budget, because you're always going to have something. It's going to be something different each year, but you're always going to have something. And Stephen and I had these conversations his last few years in advisory, and it's always a fight, but you're always bumping up against a Prop 2.5 argument by the time January and February roll around, and it pushes to the capital side. So again, it's always there. There's always, last year we didn't have one, but we're bringing one back. So there is right now a placeholder for the town, for the facilities and infrastructure capital, and it should be funded partially with free cash or some stabilization fund, which we tried several years and I never got approval for. That's not so rigidly applied, because I can't tell you how much septic pumps are going to cost 3 years before they fail. I can't. And I can't engineer my way out of it while DEP's sending us demand orders. So we need another, we know everyone on this call has had these conversations. We know we need something different than it's either this or that. So
All right.
it's getting keyed up, and it can't all rest on my shoulders. I get pretty broad shoulders, but I'm not gonna get bashed in the head with capital budget and advisory and champion this without any help. Advisory and the select board need to step up and figure out what you guys want to do legally.
All right. Are you at a point where I can take the questions from the board here? Okay. I'll take them in the order that they popped up. Paul.
Well, I have a motion I want to make, so why don't you let the others speak, and then I'll do the cleanup.
All right, I'll come back to you. All right, and then Jeff, you're next.
Yeah, I think Shauna and I have been at this for a little while, and we got the scars to prove it. I think the other big issue, and you know this, Eric, is that anytime we have a capital project that goes to town meeting, you have to have a design, enough of an information, the scoping design, in order to come up with an estimate for a capital project with enough margin in it to cover any unforeseen conditions. So I feel like we handled the roundabout in the right way because we did the design one year and then the construction the following year, some of it with ARPA funding. But you have to find a way to fund design, which is, could be considered an expense unless the project goes forward. And then with that scoping design, or a little bit more rigorous than a scoping design, then you can build a capital request with enough detail to know the components of it. But you can't just come out in 1 year and come up with a capital request because you don't have enough knowledge to understand all the components of it, unless it's a pretty straightforward or limited in scope project. Thanks.
It is, and that's something I've been struggling with for 19 years. There is a difficulty with that. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I
And
know
I mean,
that.
Jeremy knows as well as I do. And anyways, all right. Dan.
Couple things. One procedural thing. So these reserve fund transfer requests are on the agenda for advisory's meeting next Wednesday. And of course, as people with advisory experience know, it's actually advisory that has to approve the reserve fund requests. And, so Sean, hoping that you can be there on Wednesday to do kind of a repeat of some of what you went through, because I think that'll be really helpful background for people.
Dan,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. I am as well. In my view, this is exactly the kind of thing that the reserve fund is designed for, which is these unanticipated expenses that come up during the year. And I can't speak for the committee, but certainly for my part, and my guess of where the committee will land is this will be a pretty routine approval, because these are obviously things that needed to be done and couldn't have been anticipated back at budget time. On the other point about how to do this in between stuff, I'm newer to this conversation than many of others of you. I think the capital improvement plan this year had a placeholder item that was meant to cover some of these things. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but that kind of a placeholder strikes me as a very good idea. I think the advisory and capital budget constraint that Sean has commented on and has found challenging is that when capital budget and advisory approve a project, there's, from an advisory and capital budget perspective, a desire to be approving a particular project rather than just a large, a big chunk of funds to be used for something. And I think that's where the tension, is coming in. But again, on this particular item, seems to me this is just what the reserve fund is intended for. If we do have that placeholder and that chunk of money, I guess I have to figure out which part of that maybe is can be capitalized and bonded and which part can't, and there's some complications there. But having some chunk of money there strikes me as a good idea, just as I think using the reserve fund for these kinds of items is a very appropriate use of the reserve funds.
All right. Now, before I recognize Paul, I know it's going to wrap this up. Did we talk about the fire truck? Did I miss it? Or I think it's pretty straightforward. It's whatever it is, like $20,000, and I'm sure it needs it. That's right. We did touch on it. Sorry. I got very hung up on the building. All right, Paul, pull the trigger.
Okay. I move that we recommend favorable action by advisory committee to approve 2 requests for reserve fund transfers. 1, town buildings of $115,649, and 2, fire department $20,066.09.
Second.
All right, do I have a
Second.
second? Very good. All right, all in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
All right.
Paul,
Aye.
and Marianne.
Aye.
All right. Oh, I might as well. Sorry, forgot about that. All right, very good. So Dan, you heard our recommendation there, and thank you, Sean, for presenting.
Yep.
Look
Thanks.
forward to it. Taking care of it. Absolutely. All right, moving on. Consideration of final obligation of ARPA funds. I hate to see it go. Jeremy Morissette.
Thank you, Eric. Well, it's been mentioned briefly earlier during Chad's audit discussion that at the end of this calendar year, all of your ARPA funds need to be obligated, spent or obligated. The latest accounting was included in your packet. You have voted to obligate the full balance of the ARPA funds. The town received about 1.3 million in ARPA funds. You voted at select board meetings to allocate all of that towards projects. About $400,000 has yet to be spent. To obligate those funds, I'm proposing that you give me authorization to enter into the interagency agreements. There's a copy of the draft form of that agreement in your packet. That was actually developed by the town of Concord, Massachusetts, for this purpose. So I'm kind of appropriating their method. A number of other communities have been using this method as well to obligate the unspent balance to these projects so that they're obligated to be used and spent within the next 2 years. So that's one thing I'd request to the board tonight would be to vote to allow the town administrator to enter into those interagency agreements for the unspent balance of your previously approved projects for ARPA funding. And then secondly, you do have an opportunity to reappropriate or reallocate $100,000 of ARPA funds in light of this grant opportunity that has been presented to us from Mass DEP for $100,000 towards the Woodhaven water project. We do need to fill out and submit an application formally. They've invited us to participate, which means they believe we qualify and they would like to give us the money. We just need to give them the details. It's a high probability that we'll get that funding. And as you're aware, in your ARPA allocations, you've appropriated or allocated $173,000 towards the Woodhaven water improvements. So you do have an opportunity to recommit $100,000 of ARPA funds to something else. So that's the second item that you have on, you can discuss it this evening.
But what do you recommend?
Well, I'm going to jump in here. So I've been chatting with Jeremy about this. We all know that I've been advocating from day one to allocate to some previously approved capital allocations. This one, I think it's particularly important to do that because there is a small chance we don't get the grant. It's unlikely. They invited us. And if we don't get the grant, we're going to fund Woodhaven no matter what. So if we go spend this on something that's not otherwise approved, not otherwise offset some intended bond on this one here, we could actually be in the hole for $100,000, if you kind of know what I mean. Because yeah, we're going to spend on that, but then we're still going to spend on Woodhaven. It's unlikely, but it's something which I'm advocating for in this case. So like I said, I've been talking to Jeremy about this. What I recommend is actually the what was approved at town meeting, Jeremy, for the library, the design of the
Sherborn Museum and the History Center and Museum, the design for $100,000 was approved at last town meeting.
So what I'm recommending to the board, I'd like to do, is actually we allocate this to the design of the Library Historic Center, provided that the same amount of money that's authorized by town meeting is not spent. I want that provision in there, that it is not spent. So that's guaranteed not spent. And then we move forward with the grant for the Woodhaven, and then we use this to offset those approved funds. That's my recommendation. Again, I've been talking to him for last week on this. And I'll open up for any discussion from anyone, including Jeremy. Anyone?
Actually, could you just explain that one more time? I might not have been listening close enough, Eric. I'm sorry.
So town meeting authorized capital expenditure to for the design of the historic center of the library.
Yes.
I want to put this toward that, but I also want to add the provision that the town does not spend that authorized town meeting money to the amount that we're offsetting for the ARPA. I don't know how. Let's just use. I don't know what exactly. Let's say
In other words,
$100,000.
you want to do the design and you want to use as much available ARPA fund as we have, and then use the remainder from what was approved at town meeting. Is that what you're saying?
And not spend. I want the provision in there that if we put $100,000 of ARPA toward the library thing, that we don't spend $100,000 that's authorized by town meeting. I want that provision in. I think that's important.
Yeah, that makes
for design. Yeah.
makes total sense. I just didn't follow it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure I was gonna board salading it, to be honest with you.
And
So
do you
at-
know,
So Eric, just
Jeremy,
to add to that,
Yeah.
if you did this, then at a later date, you could reappropriate the prior
Yes.
debt, that 100,000 towards construction or something like that,
Yes.
or rescind it.
Yes, absolutely. The authorization doesn't actually go away. Only town meeting can rescind it. I'm just directing not to spend it if we do this. And then right, it comes back. We always have the authorization if we want to put it toward the construction. That is true. You know, that's just my kind of check and balance on this. I can take them in order, but Sean, do you have some? I'll take them in order. Paul, you're next.
I have a motion.
Oh,
based
okay,
on
I'll come to you
consent.
last. I'll come to you last. No problem. Sean, you're next.
Yeah, to be crystal clear, I think this is what I heard, and I hope this is what I heard. You want him to write into this authorization that if we get the DEP grant, then this money goes towards the library, right? Is that a
No.
contingency in there?
It's actually not. It's kind of independent of the grant. See, my fear is the grant is still a little risk, which is that's why I don't want to. So there was talk, since you're here, to put it toward the roadway because I like that, right? But the roadway is a little bit of a black hole. You can put like $1 million toward it. You just make the roadway better. You're not going to actually offset any funds. You know what I'm trying to say? So this one seems just more convenient, and I'm definitely offsetting funds. Because let's say you put it toward the roadway, you just do 100 grand more of roadway. Thinking, oh, what? We're getting 100 grand anyway of the grant. Then the grant falls through, and you're kind of spending more money. Maybe people aren't following my logic here. Maybe I'm not explaining it well. But by putting the provision in that we can't spend whatever we spend on the ARPA, we can't spend that authorization. That is a check and balance. So the grant is just independent. The grant is just kind of is what it is. It makes it completely independent of that. So I'm not worried about that. We get the grant, Woodhaven's better off. We don't get the grant, we appropriate the funds for Woodhaven. You know what I mean?
No,
It's
So I don't understand. But if you take this money away from Woodhaven and we don't get the grant, we can't build the water system.
Well, we'll know shortly, Sean. We'll know shortly.
It's my understanding we won't know about the grant until the offer funds basically expire. You know what I mean? Honestly, if we don't get the grant, we're gonna appropriate it. There's no way we're not gonna find the money for Woodhaven. That's kind of my point. Woodhaven's going to happen one way or the other. It just is.
Okay.
It can't let it expire. I mean, I can't imagine. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure Woodhaven's water is treated. It's such a no-brainer. I just don't want to. I don't want to lose this ARPA funds. Stephen.
So I have two questions. One would be the money that was approved at town meeting for the library museum project design. Was that free cash or was that borrowed?
That was borrowed. That was
Oh.
debt excluded.
Okay. And then so in terms of the timing of knowing about the grant and all of that stuff, so do we anticipate that we would know one way or other before town meeting so that if we were to need to essentially put that onto town meeting as a capital project, we could do it?
Right. Yeah, we should know in about a month.
Okay.
It's going to be after the end of this, at the end of the year after that, but
Right. But
we should
before
know
town meeting.
early in the new year.
Okay, great. Yeah. I mean, I support what Eric is saying. And especially I feel like ARPA money, putting it towards something that is bonded is, in my opinion, more useful than putting it towards something that was free cash, because the free cash is free cash and you can use that for whatever you want. But once you've borrowed something and now it's going on to future roles as debt service, you're actually saving tax money in the future by offsetting that with ARPA funds. So I think that's a wise use of this fund.
Especially since it's outside the 2.5 levy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
Marion.
Yeah, if this 100,000 is of ARPA funds is spent on the library design, first of all, is there any question about whether that's an appropriate use of ARPA funds by the powers that be in the ARPA administration? And second, I assume that you have a way to get it obligated in any case before the end of the year with your fancy obligation scheme.
Yes, yes, the interagency agreements would be
Right.
have that mechanism, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And we used ARPA funds to do the library steps. Seems like it'd be within that window. Dan.
Just a quick comment. Thanks, Eric. Sounds like if this happens and the 100K is from ARPA funds is used for the library museum project, then presumably we'd need a warrant article at town meeting to either rescind or reallocate the funds. Just clarifying that. Am I thinking about that the right way?
You are, Dan, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
But I think the capital improvement plan already includes an $800,000 item for the construction of that museum. So it'll be a discussion that's going to come up anyways. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that there'll be a lot of discussion around that, I'm sure. And
It's
this
gonna
will
be-
be one more.
it's gonna be
one
great
more
fun,
moving-
great
one
fun.
more moving part.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, I'll see what Paul has to say.
So I'd like to make a motion. Move that $100,000 previously allocated to the Woodhaven Water Project be transferred from that project to design work for the Sherborn History Center and Museum, provided, however, that the town meeting appropriation at the 2024 annual town meeting for such purposes not be spent.
And I'm going to add for the equivalent amount of the ARPA funds. So how much was that? How much did town meeting authorize for this?
100,000.
And how much do we have free in ARPA?
100,000.
All right, that's pretty even. Okay, that works out pretty good. It's almost purposeful. And I think Paul's motion makes sense though. Not that didn't any add-on.
So I would
All right.
second his motion.
All right, let's collect the votes. All in favor, Stephen, Jeff,
All right.
Paul,
Aye.
and Marianne.
Aye.
I might as well. Very good. And this is great. I think it's a great way to wind it up. I finally got my authorized item up funded by ARPA.
And
Oh, great.
one more vote, if you would, to allow myself as town administrator to sign the interagency agreements for the unspent balance.
All
right.
Right.
Moved by Paul. Oh, sorry.
I move that the town administrator be authorized to sign interagency agreements to
Obligate.
I want to be sure, I want to try and find the right word to leave a zero balance, to obligate all remaining unobligated ARPA funds.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
All right.
Paul,
Aye.
and Marion.
Aye.
And I might as well. All right, very good. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Good idea. Okay, so moving on to that, number 8, the introduction to the draft FY26-31 capital improvement plan, and are also FY26 capital budget requests. This is Jeremy, and I'll say I've been doing this for a while. I think it's one of the best plans I've seen laid out there in a while, so or really ever. So go ahead, Jeremy.
Great, thanks, Eric. So now that we've gotten all of the capital requests submitted, wanted to give the board an update of the summary. So similar to last year, working with the capital budget committee and their guidance, Deb and I assisted the capital budget committee to assemble a comprehensive capital plan that included the requests for FY26, but also 5 years out as well. So this plan covers the fiscal years FY26 through FY31. We put out requests to all of the budget makers, including the school districts, the various departments and committees that may have capital projects, solicited input from them and compiled that into a capital budget plan. a capital improvement plan. The entirety, so from FY26 to FY31, the plan now includes 51 projects. And this was actually just updated today in that the regional school committee approved their capital plan at their meeting last night. So that was prior to or after I was able to publish. So what is in your packet has already been updated with the latest information for the regional schools. So currently now, there are 51 projects. The regional schools added a project to do some campus paving at the middle and high school campus. So that was the additional project. They also shuffled some projects around. They deferred some projects out in years, and the cost of one of their requests for the spring was adjusted upwards. But in any event, the full 6-year capital improvement plan includes $18 million worth of capital projects currently proposed to be funded with $15 million in tax-exempt borrowing, utilizing $1.5 million in free cash, and also factors in the known state aid in Chapter 90. These charts give a breakdown by department and by category of all those requests. You'll see the Public Works Department, it has the largest amount of requests in that their requests tend to be the more expensive with infrastructure and roadway maintenance and stormwater. That's followed by the schools with their facilities improvements, and then police and fire, which are mostly vehicles and equipment. And the select board in this case is sort of a catch-all category. So when there's not a specific department, say like elder housing for Woodhaven, that would fall under the select board in this category. And then followed by recreation. Recreation did put together a multi-year capital plan that's been incorporated into this overall capital improvement plan. And on the right is a breakdown by category, whether it be infrastructure, facilities, repair and replacement, parks and grounds and open space, or vehicles and equipment. And again, infrastructure, roadway maintenance, stormwater, compliance was the largest, followed by facilities, repair and replacements. So that was a look at the entire 6-year plan in a brief synopsis. The full detail, of the plan has been published. It will be up on the town's website shortly. Has been distributed to all of the various stakeholders and committees, advisory, select board, capital budget committee, and many others. This slide here is a focus on the current requests for this spring's town meeting. So these would be requests to be funded in fiscal year FY26. And you'll notice the change right on the top for the regional schools. They've deferred 3 of the projects that they had scheduled for FY26 to outer years. However, they have adjusted the one project cost for the turf field track and fencing project at the middle and high school. They've adjusted that to an overall value of $2 million. Sherborn's share is about 46% of that, totaling $927,000. The balance of the projects are local projects, with the Sherborn schools at Pine Hill requesting $30,000 for classroom floors. Police has 2 requests for 2 vehicles. That's their typical cycle of replacement is 1 vehicle 1 year, 2 the next, 1 they're in a 2 vehicle year. The fire department has a request for a replacement of the town's sole ambulance. That's the majority of what's shown there. They also are looking to replace a CPR device that's reached the age of the end of its useful life. Public Works is requesting funds to refurbish a dump truck and snow fighter. Sean has creatively come up with, instead of a full replacement, he's proposing to refurbish the vehicle and add a new body that will give him more flexibility, called a hook lift, and swap bodies on it. It'll become a much more useful vehicle for him. And also by refurbishing the vehicle, it'll be a lot less I think it was $350,000 last year for replacement vehicle. And this current request for 250,000. As noted, there is a town facilities and infrastructure planning design request. This is new. This would be funding for the planning and design of town building type work ahead of a request for the actual implementation. Roadway management, we've included a placeholder of 500,000 in this current request. That's twice the amount of last year. Last year was 250,000. And from the recent presentation by the town's consultant, they're suggesting the need is 1.2 million to continue on with keep the roads in their current state. However, that's a real lot to bite off all in 1 year. So we're suggesting maybe phasing that in by increasing the amount somewhat to 500,000. Stormwater compliance has a placeholder of 250,000. We hope to refine that number and lower that number, hopefully cut that in half or more in the coming month. So Sean and I will be continuing conversations with our consultant on what the needs are to stay in compliance with our stormwater permit. IT has a request to replace additional servers, computers. The phone system apparently is at the end of its life, and Klaus is proposing a replacement. And there's also a network switch and connectivity project that he's placed on the capital plan. Under the select board category, Woodhaven is looking to replace the air conditioning units. There's 2 units per apartment building or apartment unit that need to be replaced. There's a request to replace town hall meeting room furnishings. That would be in the select board meeting room and the small conference room. We're finding that the furniture there is heavy, it's worn, it's not as flexible and useful for all of the events that are being held there now. The Council on Aging does a number of events there, and they're looking to be able to use that space much more creatively and flexibly. And the current furnishings are a little tattered and worn. The Sherborn History Center and Museum, 800,000. That number will be refined as well. The designer is well underway, coming up with the final design. And prior to town meeting, we hope to have the project out to bid and have some real construction dollars to refine going into town meeting. The planning board is requesting funds to do a zoning bylaw review, and recreation has 2 projects. One, the purchase of robotic field mowers for Laurel Field, and the Jameson Field tennis and pickleball court replacement they've brought back from last year. And so currently the sum total of requests for FY26 are 4.3 million.
Can I ask a couple questions on this page?
Yeah,
Sure.
let's first of all, only 4.3 million. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Only. All right, let's see from the top down. Okay, the refurbishing the truck. Do we know, so in terms of like the useful life of the vehicle with a refurbishing versus replacing it with a new vehicle, is there a difference in the expected life of the vehicle? Would it last as long as a new vehicle or not as long?
A good question, but likely similar length of time.
Okay.
This is just an overview for you folks tonight. We'll come back with more specifics on each, and you'll have an opportunity to vote your support as you've done in the past.
Yeah.
So we can certainly feel free to ask questions. We can gather more information and bring it back to you. But
yeah, no, I just have some
seeking your support or anything like that tonight. This is just a broad overview of where things sit right now. This was presented to the Capital Budget Committee last night, and the reaction was similar. They're going to be doing a lot of vetting of these projects over the coming weeks.
So I'm just gonna. Oh, sorry.
Nope. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, that's ballpark a third of the cost of a new vehicle, I believe. Sean can pipe in, but
Oh, I definitely. I definitely appreciate that. There's no question about that, the refurbish. I do want to get to some broad statements. You're right. We're going to vet the details later and things like that. I'm sure some of these either go away, go down, or whatever it is. But I definitely want to look at strategies onto what do you call it, unfunding these. When I say that, I don't mean just like find free money, but between bonding and not bonding, or keep some within the 2.5 levy. I'm going to have a hard time doing 4.3 million exempt, 2.5 exempt borrowing. I just think that's going to be a big, big, big ask. So I'd like to see some strategy between borrowing within the 2.5 levy, using free cash, using these strategies we talked about offline, Jeremy, with like you can what do you call it? Allocate funds into a separate fund essentially that you can use later on or whatever it is. I definitely would not support like 4.3 bonding exempt from 2.5. All those provisions. That's just my big picture
One
thought.
number to point out, Eric, is the turf field was donated by Linda Marino, the original
Yeah.
turf field, at the cost of $1 million about 15 years ago.
Nope. Yeah, that was very appreciative. That was huge. But yeah, now it's there.
Marino of EMC.
No, I
Well,
know.
Another
Yeah.
question I have is the Woodhaven air conditioner replacement. I know in past years when Woodhaven has needed capital improvement, they have effectively covered it themselves and paid off the debt service with their revolving fund. And this being a relatively, I mean, I think there was something big recently. Was it the windows? But certainly kind of like some, because I think that didn't they replace the roof recently, and I think that they are handling the debt service on their new roof themselves, right? So I'm just
That's correct.
wondering the air conditioner replacement, why can't they do something similar?
They would, yeah. So the debt service on this would be paid for through their accounts.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
But they still need town meeting authorization, correct? It was something like that, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So as far as what the draft funding source for all of those, that's summarized here. Utilizing about $390,000 in free cash to fund some projects, and the balance being tax-exempt borrowing.
I do just want to point out that in your 6-year overview, the category of parks and grounds and open space, it was around 2.1 million. And over 6 years, the anticipated CPA revenue would have been about 1.8 million. So I just want to put that out there.
I want to put that out there. I was waiting for you to say that.
just saying, for
Yeah,
looking
just
for
saying,
a way to chip
we're
away.
gonna hear that again
Yeah. Exactly.
from me.
Not sure who needs to hear that, but there you go.
Can
All
I,
right, Jeremy. There you go.
Yeah, just so I'll just finish up with 2 more slides, just to show, there is an opportunity to fund more capital projects with free cash, and that free cash was certified at approximately 3.2 million. So that's higher than it's been in the recent past. So there is an opportunity to fund, possibly more dollars from free cash as opposed to borrowing. And included in the capital budget, the full document, there's a pretty detailed in the end of it, in one of the appendixes, there's a pretty detailed listing of all of the grant awards that the town has received over the last 3 years, and it's quite impressive. So these are all projects that would have had to be funded through the capital plan, but because of the hard work of town staff, receives state or federal grants to fund them. On the bottom there, you'll see in FY23, $500,000 of projects that would have otherwise been on the capital plan, all the way up now to FY25, on nearly 1.4 million in grant funded projects that would have been on the capital plan, possibly otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think that's, kudos to all the hard work of staff for chasing down and obtaining other folks' money.
Absolutely.
Huge.
All right, Paul, then go ahead.
great. I wanted to concur with Eric Johnson on his remarks about this sort of sneak override of all of these debt exclusions. Most of my towns do borrowings within the levy limit. And I'm pretty sure that's what Framingham does, because that's what most communities do across the state. And we're kind of unique that we keep going to the voters and asking the voters to take outside the limits of Prop 2.5 all these projects, and some of them are so small that it just doesn't make any sense to do it that way. I understand the actual borrowings will be all added together into one bigger bond bill, but nevertheless, there's got to be some of these that we can fund in the more traditional way, which is just ordinary borrowings. So I'll stand with Eric on that one.
Right. I will say, Paul, since then I had a meeting with Dan and Jeremy, and he did some research. There are actually a few towns that do it, not many, and I fully agree with you. And some towns do a partial thing. I think Sherborn could evolve in some kind of hybrid where some is wooden levy, some is maybe exempt, something like that, in that range there. I was surprised. It was, I don't know if you remember offhand, Jeremy, it was like 1 or 2 towns we found, which also makes it everything exempt, whatever else. And
Yeah,
it was a very interesting meeting we
wasn't
had there.
totally unique, but it's definitely the minority. But
Definitely, yeah.
Wasn't fully unique in that approach.
It was a very. So go ahead, John. Go ahead, Stephen.
I will say, I mean, as generally speaking, Eric, you know that I agree with you about this point about wanting to bring more of the debt under the Prop 2.5. I will say that, as a long-term goal, I will say that in the short term, I mean, everything that I've been hearing both from Jeremy and from advisory is that we're probably headed for a 2.5 override in probably 2 years, just to fund the budget. So right now, trying to bring more of this of the debt under 2.5 may just end up accelerating. When we need an override just to fund the operating budget. And might extend the number of years that where we would continue to need an override for that. But I mean, obviously, nobody can predict the financial sort of climate in 3 years, but it is something to consider that right at this moment might not be the best time to start implementing the strategy. But I don't know. But if not now, when? I also, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's tough.
If I could respond to that.
Yeah, go, Paul.
When you do a borrowing, you don't look at 1.3 million going on to the budget. You look at what's the amount of the debt service. So if you borrow something for 20 years, it's not 1.3 million. You're looking at essentially 5% of that 1.3. And what 5%? That's like 65,000. Trying to do that quick. That's the add-on, the debt service, not the whole thing. And it's fair to spread out some of these costs over new residents, all of that we do with the whole concept behind borrowing. So it preserves that sort of fundamental fairness, but it doesn't have the effect of taking everything outside Prop 2.5 and adding all these costs to the taxpayer.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, Paul. It makes sense. But I will say that the draft plan here is calling for about $4 million of excluded debt. So 5% of that is 200,000, which is, I mean, our excess levy capacity was at 700,000. So that's yeah. I don't know that we can absorb another $150,000 to $200,000 of borrowing under the 2.5 levy.
Yes, I agree with that. And actually, and debt service modeling is complicated. All things have different loan durations and stuff like that.
Yep.
If you look at it out, if you do 10 years, I know it gets real fuzzy after 5 years, but even do the 5 years, you can see even the certain peaks. You can actually make a decision. Certain infrastructure, like water pipes, is something I know about. I believe it can be bonded for 40 years. You can actually do some pretty far out things, and things like that might be considered when you do have a certain peak year. I know people don't often like to make an obligation 40 years long, but it might be something worth considering if it flattens out the hump a little bit. Anyways, I thought this was well done, and I think there's gonna be some more vetting. And if Dan's on this call, I'll send you a text. I think we got to sit down and talk a little bit. Maybe you, me, and Jeremy, some thoughts and some stuff here. Okay.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna text you, but anyways. All right. Any other questions or comments relative to this? Again, my compliments for it, and I think it's the beginning of a lot of discussions.
Thank you.
All right. So, moving on here. Number 9, consent agenda.
Move approval.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
All right.
Paul,
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
I might as well. Are there any select board reports?
I have one quick one. This morning, the Metro West Regional Collaborative met. This is the group of towns included in the MAPC subgroup that includes, I don't have the list in front of me, Sherborn. Now, Sherborn has joined this in the last 2 or 3 years. Natick, Holliston, Ashland, Wellesley, not Dover, but most of the towns just to the west and north of us. It's quite a good group. It's composed of one select board member and one planning board member from each town, so it's quite useful. I just wanted to say that they approved use of their funds. Actually, the Metro West region charges a small sort of fee, dues to each town, unlike the other regions. And they use those dues for special projects. And this morning, we approved 2 special projects, both of which sound promising, but we'll see. One is to, among this group of towns, to analyze how local communications works. How do we reach our constituents? Of course, there's Nextdoor, and newspapers are no longer in existence around here. So it is a problem for every town. How do you reach people? And they're going to be doing a series of interviews in each town and try to figure out what are best practices and what can be shared with other towns. So that's good. And the other good shared thing is that they're going to do a review of software technologies, municipal software technologies used in this group of towns to see what turns out to be the best constellation of applications and software currently. And I think it'll be useful to find out what other towns are doing and what kind of glitches they run into, because I think everybody's running into some kind of glitch. And both of these actually could lead to a more regionalization of these systems so that towns can share their information a little more easily. So there again, they're going to be interviewing IT people, Jeremy, Klaus, others in town who are using and setting up these systems for us. So I thought those are 2 good projects that we're participating in.
That sounds good. I will say one thing, that towns in general don't talk enough to each other. And even think MMA makes great strides, and Jeremy chairs up an MMA group and infrastructure, and I think those things help a lot. But it's just almost just the kind of nature of it with silos and volunteerism and stuff like that. So any effort like that where towns can kind of pull together and share information or even share like burdens, financial burdens, I think is a great idea. Paul, you have a comment, question, something?
Yeah, that I've been working with other towns on the issue of no newspapers, and the general laws require the publication of various things, advertisements, hearings, and the like, in the newspaper general circulation in the town. And instead, we're proposing language that would authorize the select board to hold a hearing and to determine the most effective way to reach the voters in that community and allow that to be added to, so it's newspapers and what's determined by a vote of the Board of Selectmen. This hearing by the Board of Selectmen would be open to the public and so on, but it would set an alternative to trying to publish something, in the New York Times, because you're trying to reach people in Sherborn. Just
Oh, right, that fits right into this project, Paul, so I'm glad to hear about that.
I vote for town criers. Let's bring back town
There you
criers.
go.
There you go.
I know it seemed to happen slowly. I mean, you look at what is it? The value of the Boston Globe went from billions to like barely $1 million in just like a few years. It was really incredible. And I could talk about that frankly for hours, and I won't. All right, any other select board reports? All right, moving on then. Town administrator reports. Jeremy.
Sure. Yeah, I get three quick ones for you. The working group that has been vetting the proposals submitted for design consultants for the Route 2716 project has conducted interviews and has selected our preferred candidate that we're entering negotiations with. So that's moving along well. Once we have a contract in place, we'll announce the vendor. We had some interviews this morning with Director of Assessing candidates, and there are two very promising candidates that we're discussing farther. Diane, myself, and the chair of the Board of Assessors interviewed the candidates this morning, and we're pleased with the candidates. So good news there. And just wanted to relay the advertisement that Heidi sent out, that the MBTA multifamily overlay zoning district public hearing is on December 17th. So just wanted to get that news out there again at 7 p.m.
Great. It's important. Got it in the mail.
So,
all right.
Can I make a motion?
I don't know. If it's moved to adjourn, I might not recognize you. Just kidding. No, go ahead, Paul.
Move to adjourn.
There you go. All right. All right. I'm having too much fun here.
I
A
second.
second. All right. All in favor, Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
All right.
Paul?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
Aye. For this time, I am I as well. All right. Good meeting. And see everyone. I think it'll be a light meeting in a couple weeks.
Ciao, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Good.
Take care.
See ya.
Have a great weekend.